Hello everyone, it's Parisha from The Artistic Scroll, and in this tutorial we're going to learn how to draw this beautiful sunshine potion in Procreate. So before we get started, here's what you'll need: your iPad and pencil, the Procreate app, and the sketch file and color palette for the tutorial, which you can download for free from the Artistic Archive. And that's my vault of free resources that I've created just for you. The link's in the description, so download the files and come back to this canvas where you can see that the sketch is already there on one of the layers, and then all we need to do is just color in the background. But before we do that, let's rename the sketch layer as Sketch. And now let's find our color palette called the Sunshine Potion and set it as default. And then move this palette menu to the left. And now, just select the background color as this dark blue color. And you can finally see the sketch now. So reduce the opacity of the sketch so you're able to just barely see it enough to be able to draw under it. So what we're going to do now is work on the potion. So create a new layer and move it under the sketch layer. And then go to inking and select the technical pen brush. Now for the potion, we're going to use this bright yellow color. And let's go ahead and just draw the front layer of the potion. We're going to be working on the back layer of the potion separately. So let's just concentrate on the front layer first. And go ahead and outline it first. And then we're going to fill it in. If you're unable to get a perfect semicircle like me, you can just try and break your shape into small arcs and complete it that way. Really, it's very frustrating to not get the shape in the first go, but don't let it limit you. And once you're happy, just fill it in with this bright yellow color. The colors do look a bit too bright on this video. It might look a little bit different on your own canvas, so don't worry about that. It's exactly what it's supposed to look like in your canvas, so don't worry about it. Okay, so next we're going to create a new clipping mask on top of this flat yellow color. And then go to airbrushing and select the soft brush. And now with this next orange color, we just want to create a gradient, a soft orange gradient to the potion. So adjust the size of the brush a bit and just try and create a bit of a gradient on the lower end of the potion. And then we can apply a blur to it as well. So go to adjustments and apply a Gaussian blur of about 15%. Great. We're going to repeat this step with another clipping mask and this darker orange color. So keeping the same soft brush, try and reduce the size of the brush and the extent of the gradient this time. And just paint in a soft line of darker orange and then apply another Gaussian blur of about 15% again. So you can see we've got a nice gradient of yellow potion there. But it won't be complete until we add in a bit more glow in there. So create a new clipping mask and then change the blend mode of this clipping mask to add. So add is responsible for making things bright in a sense. And let's just keep this yellow color again, and with the soft airbrush on the, let's say in the central top area, just create some nice glowing effect. And again, blur it all up. And we can even increase the blur this time to about 20%. That's looking much better. It's still a little plain on the top end, so we're going to create a new clipping mask. And this time, let's just choose this orange color here. And then go back to inking and select the technical pen brush. Increase the size of the brush slightly. And then just try and make a little outline of the top edge of the potion, keeping a bit of space there between the edge of the potion and this, just so that, you know, it gives a bit of an impression of thickness to the potion. So we can do that. We can even try and move this layer a little bit upwards if there's too much of a space between the potion edge and this line. So create a new clipping mask again, and this time change the blend mode of this new clipping mask to add. Well, I've changed it back to normal. Let's keep it back to normal. And we'll actually just use this really pale yellow, almost white color. And with the same brush, create a little bit of an outline of the top edge. Yep, I did change it back to add. If you did that too, I'm so sorry, but yeah, you can just leave it at add. And then apply some blur to this as well. And this is exactly what I meant. Leave some space between the edge and the orange line. And you can see it's got a nice effect of an edge of a thicker potion as such. So we've just reduced the opacity of both of these outline layers. Yeah, that looks great. So let's just group all of these layers together and name the whole group as base. Great, so now let's create a new layer and move this below the base group. We're going to be creating the back part of the potion. So go back to the technical pen brush and select this yellow color. And now paint in the back part of the potion. Make sure that the edge of this potion is in line with the edge of the bottle, which we'll be making later, but just try and keep it within the margins. As you can see here, I've just erased it a bit. That looks good. Now we're going to repeat all the steps again, so create a new clipping mask, and with this orange color and the soft brush, create a bit of a gradient on the lower edge of the potion. And then apply a Gaussian blur of 15%, and then repeat this step with another clipping mask and the darker orange color. Again, blur it up, another 15%. And now we're going to create the central glow of the potion with this yellow color by changing the blend mode of a new clipping mask to add with the same soft brush, and then applying a blur of 20%. You can even move this around a little bit just so that it's a bit more in the center. Now create a new clipping mask and then go back to the technical pen brush, select the orange color, and then create a little bit of an outline on the top edge of the potion with the orange color, and then blur it up. Just about 4% should be good. And then let's create a new clipping mask on top of that. And then we've changed the blend mode to add. And with this pale yellow color, create a little bit more of a highlight outline, and then apply a blur of 4%. Reduce the opacity of this layer to around 60%. And we are done with the potion. So let's group all of these layers together and rename this group as back base. Now it's time to create a layer for the glass bottle. So we're going to create a layer right on top of the potion, and then with this gray color and the technical pen brush, try and create a bit of a circle first, which would be of the diameter of the outer edge of the bottle. So slowly just try and trace that, and then keeping a finger on your screen with the quick shape menu, convert it into a circle. And then you can even just use the transform tool to slightly increase the size and accommodate it into your illustration. Make sure that uniform has been selected in the transform tool. And now duplicate this circle. And then again with uniform selected, just reduce the size of this circle so that you can create the inner circle. And just place it in the center so that it aligns perfectly in the center of the bigger circle. So that's our bottle, and that looks great. Now that's perfectly aligned. Now what we're going to do is basically we're just going to erase the top part of this bottle, as you can see. And since they're both on separate layers, we want to make sure that they're still on separate layers for later purposes. So just erase the top end of the circle, because we're going to be extending the edge like that into the neck of the bottle. Repeat this step for the inner edge of the bottle. Okay, so that looks good. Now our task is to create a bit of an impression of glass there. So what we're going to do now is just try and blur the outer edge of the inner edge of the bottle. So just select the, let's say we're starting off with the inner side of the bottle, that layer. So select that layer, and then now just use the blending tool, the soft airbrush as the blending tool, and smudge the outer edge of that layer, as you can see. Because we want a softer edge in the middle of the entire bottle, while there is a stronger, crisper edge facing the potion outside. And this gives us a nice glass sort of effect later. We'll be adding some highlights on top of this, so that'll look much more like glass than it does right now. But trust the process, try and just blur the edge slightly. Do not use Gaussian blur for this, because Gaussian blur will basically just blend both edges of this gray line simultaneously, which we do not want. We want just one side, not both sides blended. Okay, so that looks great. Now go to the other layer, which is the outer edge of the bottle. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to be blending the inner side of this outer edge of the bottle. Okay, so that looks great. As you can see, we've got blended edges. There's just a little portion of the inner end of the glass, which I've added it in. And now we create a new layer on top of this, and then change the blend mode to add. Remember when I was saying we're going to add some highlights? We're going to do exactly that for both the edges of the bottle. So create clipping masks to both of them, change the blend modes to add, and then with the soft airbrush, or the soft brush, no, we're using the soft airbrush, and the same gray color selected, we're going to be adding some soft highlights to the bottle. Now, you don't have to put too much pressure on the entire bottle edge as such. Just try and build up gently with the layers that you're putting on for the highlights. So as you can see, there are some areas which are still darker, and I haven't really applied a full gradient as such for all parts of the highlights. So now we're going to paint the top edge of the bottle. So again, with the technical pen brush and on a new layer, let's go ahead and first create this ellipse. And then you can even make that uniform with the quick shapes. And then create a nice top for the bottle. You can even give it a bit of a dimension by just painting in some edges, and especially fill in the top circular, the elliptical edge. And now use the eraser and erase the central part, and we are going to blend it out. As you can see, that really gives us a nice glass kind of effect, where we know that there's a bit more translucency and not exactly like a fully transparent glass, but a thicker glass appearance that we want to give an effect of here. And you can repeat this step in some areas, erase some more and then blend it out a bit. You can blend the margin, the upper margin of the top of the bottle as well. And we'll repeat the step of adding the highlights here. So create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to add, and then with the soft airbrush and the same gray color, create some highlights. Just some gentle highlights. You can reduce the size of the brush and especially emphasize the margins. And that looks much nicer. Great, so we're done with the glass. That looks so good. Well, we're almost done with the potion bottle. So the next thing that we need to do is add in some reflections. But before that, group all of these layers together and we're going to name that as glass. So create a new layer on top of this glass group. And then with the soft airbrush and the same gray color selected, just create some arcs basically. Just gently, you don't have to put a lot of pressure, but just how I'm doing here, create a couple of lines there, curves. And don't worry, I know it looks gray there, but we're going to change the blend mode in a second. So let's just do that straight away. Change the blend mode to add. And as you can see, you've got a nice glowing sort of effect there. And if we just apply a Gaussian blur of 15%, that gives us a beautiful effect of volume there for the glass potion bottle. Excellent. So create a new layer on top of this now and change the blend mode to add. And then with the technical pen brush selected and this white color, we're going to be painting in these reflections. You can even add a little bit of a line at the bottom end of the potion bottle, as well as a little line up on the top end of the bottle. Gives a nice glossy sort of a reflection there. Just fill in these reflections here on the main side of the bottle, ensuring that it fully fills in the reflection that you've drawn here. And what I'm doing right now is just playing around with the threshold. That is, if you move your pencil to the right, it increases the threshold. If you move it to the left, it decreases it. Okay, so reduce the opacity of this layer and you've got a nice reflection there, as you can see. So group all of these layers together and name the group as reflections. Now it's time to draw the bubbles of the potion. So let's go back to the base group and create a new layer on top of that. And with the technical pen brush and this orange color, let's first go ahead and create the flat layer for the bubbles. And now we're going to add some dimension to the bubbles. So create a new clipping mask on top of this bubbles layer and then change the blend mode to add. And then going back to this yellow color, and let's select the soft airbrush in airbrushing. And just very gently, but reduce the size of the brush, fill in a little bit of a glow to the bubble. Just on one end, try and leave a sliver of orange still in the bubble so that you can see that the bubbles are separate from the potion, but still bubbles of the potion itself. So what we've basically done is we've created the shadow of the bubble first, and then we've tried to create the base of the bubble after with this yellow color. Okay, that looks great. I'm going to reduce the opacity slightly to about 60% and then create a new clipping mask on top of this. We're going to repeat this step, change the blend mode to add, and then this time let's select this pale white color, pale yellow color, and with the same brush, go ahead and slightly create a bit of a whitish glow just over the area where you applied the yellow color. Okay, it's time for one last layer. So create a new clipping mask. And then we're going to select this white color. And this time choose the technical pen brush. And then just put in a slight dot, just at one end of the bubbles. It looks a little odd, we'll mend it in a bit, don't worry. This is just to add a slight slight glow there. And now just change the blend mode of this to add again. And we're going to reduce the opacity to about 80%. Alright, so just group all of these layers together and then rename this as bubbles. Our bubbles are ready. Great. So the next task that we need to do is take care of this cord. So that's going to be on top of the entire bottle as such. So go above the reflections and create a new layer. Select the technical pen brush and this brown color, and then start outlining the cord. Make sure that there's an edge outside the bottle as well, so that it gives an effect that this cord is 3D and has a bit more volume to it. I am drawing the entire cord right now, but I'm going to be erasing a portion in a bit because it's supposed to be at the back of the bottle rather than the front. You'll see what I mean in a second. But until then, just go ahead and outline everything. This area of the cord is basically an area where the cord is turning on itself. So we're trying to get that effect as well. Okay. So this is exactly the part which I said is behind the bottle. So we're going to erase this right now and we'll create it on a separate layer a little later. But for now, let's just erase this. Just imagine that it is behind the bottle's neck. So it needs to be at a different transparency. So we'll be handling that on a separate layer. So go ahead and just fill all of these front cord areas first. Good, that looks great. So we're just going to reduce the sketch opacity a little bit. And this time we just want to create the paler edge of this cord as such. So create a new clipping mask on top, and then with this lighter brown color, we're going to paint in the upper edge of the cord. Because it's a more 3D structure, we're expecting it to be something like a flat leather cord. That's the kind of effect that we're going for. So just imagine it having a lighter edge, and the flat area is more like the darker brown color. Now repeat this step for the other edges. If you long press on this color that you've got up there in the colors menu, you are able to access the last color that you used. So that's another Procreate shortcut that you can make use of and save some time. Remember, you can always clean up the edges by going back to the base layer. The clipping mask is only going to work if there is a color there on the base layer that it is clipped onto. So if there's no space there, you'll probably have to go back and make some space. add in some color for the clipping to work on. So like I said, this area of the cord is where the cord is turning on itself. So we're trying to achieve that effect here. Okay, so that's starting to look much more like a 3D cord. Now let's add some shadows. So create a new clipping mask on top. And then this time we're going to change the blend mode to multiply. So just to make sure that we don't really affect this pale edge, we've selected the pale edge clipping mask layer and then tapped invert, so that whatever we draw is not going to affect the pale edge layer itself, as you can see. So we return to our shadows layer and we're working on the shadows layer right now with the same technical pen brush and the brown base color. And add in your shadows. Do that with the entire cord. Alright, so remove the selection now, and we are going to add some highlights to the opposite end of the shadows. So before we do that, just reduce the opacity of the shadow layer to around 80%, and now create a new clipping mask and change the blend mode to add. And then again with the same technical pen brush and the same brown color selected, just increase the size of the brush itself and now start adding in the highlights. Now remember, the highlights can definitely go over the pale edge that we had made, and just try and make sure we don't go over the shadow areas too much. So you can even use the same trick of selecting the shadow layer and then inverting it. I've just not gone ahead and done that this time, but you can definitely use that. As you can see, my highlights have gone onto the shadow layer, but it's okay. I mean, you can always avoid that on your end. Now it's time to create the back part of the cord. Before that, let's just group all of the front ones together. And then create a new layer below this front cord group. And then paint in the base for the back part of the cord, sorry. Just make sure that the ends of that meet the front cord. And then fill it in. And now we're going to reduce the opacity of this back cord to somewhere around 70%. So it gives an impression that there is a depth to this. It's behind the bottle, as you can see. And we're going to repeat all the same steps of adding in an edge first on a new clipping mask, and then adding a shadow on a new clipping mask and changing the blend mode to multiply and reducing the opacity of that layer to about 80%. And then on a new clipping mask layer, changing the blend mode to add, we add in the final highlights to that cord. And that definitely gives us the impression that this part of the cord is behind the bottle. Awesome. So let's group all of these layers together and both the cord layers together, both the cord groups, sorry, and rename that group as cord. Excellent. It's time now to create the label. So let's go ahead and just bring up the sketch a little bit more and then create a new layer below the cord group. And then with this pale tan color, create an outline of the label. Make sure that you also draw in the whole of the label, just like this, and then fill it in. Okay, now we're going to be adding in all the lettering, so create a new clipping mask on top of that, and then select this really dark, almost charcoal color, and with the same technical pen brush, write out drops of sunshine. And then just go ahead and draw the border as well. Perfect. It's time now to add some texture to this label. So create a new clipping mask on top and then change the blend mode to multiply. And for the brush, we're basically going to just select this pale tan color and go back to textures in the brush and select Dove Lake. So this Dove Lake brush is really nice. It gives a nice canvas, parchment sort of an effect. And just very lightly paint in this texture. And now we're just going to add a little bit of highlights to this label. So create a new clipping mask and change the blend mode to add, and with the same pale tan color, and this time selecting the soft brush in airbrushing, gonna add in some highlights. Just very gently, don't put a lot of pressure because it's really going to be intense. Our main areas of highlights will be wherever we're expecting there to be fumes that you can now see on the sketch, because those are going to be the glowing fumes. So those glowing fumes are going to have some glowing effect on the label. So specifically around those areas, we want all the highlights concentrated. That's great. Now group all of these layers together and rename the group as label. Okay, so now it's time to create this charm. So create a new layer on top of this label group, and then go back to the technical pen brush and select this brown color. We're going to first create just the circular base for the charm. Make sure it's a perfect circle, and then fill it in. Now create a new layer on top of this brown circle. Select the circle. We're not going to create a clipping mask, but on the new layer above the circle, we're now going to be creating the spiral. The reason why we didn't create a clipping mask on top of this was because we want to add some individual highlights and shadows to that as well, whereas maintaining the brown layer as a separate entity of itself. So this is a good way. Selection tool is amazing to be able to just individually select areas that you can work comfortably on. So that's how you create the spiral. And you can even just try and erase some of these outlines so that it's forming a perfect spiral with equal thickness all around. And once you're happy with that, just turn off the sketch and then do some final refinements on the shape. Okay, so now create a new clipping mask on top of this spiral, and we're going to add in some highlights and shadows. So starting off with some more gradient first, with the soft airbrush, try and create some highlight gradients in the areas we're expecting highlights to be, which will be on the lower end of the spiral, because of the glowing portion directly causing the light to affect that area of the charm. And then you can apply a slight Gaussian blur of about 2% to blend it all in. Now create a new clipping mask on top of this layer, and then change the blend mode to multiply. We'll be adding some shadows on the opposite side of the highlights. So make sure you've still got that same light gold color selected. And then play around with the size of the brush to create some shadows on the opposite side. Okay, so now we're just going to add in some reflections on top of this. So create a new clipping mask on top, and then this time change the blend mode to add. I'm just refining a few more things, and you'll see me doing this quite a lot. You'll probably be doing this yourself too, going back and forth between layers. And this is quite a normal thing, so don't worry about not being able to get everything proper in the first go. So going back to the shadows layer, just make sure you've blurred the shadows. Just about a 2% blurring. Now returning to our reflections layer, our main highlights on the charm, and with the same light gold color, we're painting in the reflections. And these are obviously going to be on the same side as our light highlights. Just a slightly more expanded in a way. Okay, now we're going to create a new clipping mask on top of this and just add a general shadow right to the top of this charm. So change the blend mode to multiply, select this spiral base color, and just on the top edge of this spiral charm, paint in a little bit of a general shadow. That gives it a nice gradient and an impression that the top part is more in the shadows than the lighter edge, which is the lower end. Now return to your brown base and create a new clipping mask on that. We're going to add some shadows there, so change the blend mode to multiply, select the brown color of the base, and then with the same soft airbrush, create some shadows. So this time, because the spiral is placed in such a way that we're expecting the shadows to be on the lower edge of the base, basically. As you can see, when you think that the light is going to be reflected, it's going to hit the top end of the spiral in a way. So the shadows are going to be on the opposite end. And then apply a Gaussian blur of about 2% there. And we're done with the spiral charm at least, so group all of these layers together and then rename the group as spiral. Now switch your sketch back on, and we're going to create a new layer under the spiral layer. And this time we're going to be painting in the rays. So with the technical pen brush and this brown color that was the same color as our spiral, start painting in the sun rays of the charm. So the effect that we're trying to get here is basically that of old gold metal. And these are the colors that you would try and use for that kind of a metal effect. And you can use that for any illustration of yours. We'll be doing lots of similar kinds of illustrations where you'll get more used to these colors and the effect of trying to achieve this metallic jewelry or just metal in general, because that is such a handy skill to try and work upon, because you see metal almost everywhere, don't you? So being able to perfect that technique will really help you in your artwork. Okay, so now create a new clipping mask on top of this base. And we're going to be painting in these edges. So with this light gold color, paint in the edges. And you can turn off the sketch and just refine these edges slightly, as needed. When you're happy with that, create a new clipping mask on top, and then change the blend mode to multiply. We'll be adding some shadows. So just select this edge layer and then tap invert to basically remove that part from your illustration, from your shadows layer. So go back to the shadows, new clipping mask that you've created, and with the same pale gold color, with the blend mode multiply and the soft airbrush, start creating these nice shadowy areas of the rays. So the whole technique with the soft airbrush is to be very gentle with the pressure that you apply, and it's most useful when you start building upon the strokes of your application of the soft airbrush than being applying a lot of pressure in the first go itself. So now create a new clipping mask for the highlights and change the blend mode to add. With the same gold color, paint in and build upon your highlights on the other side of the shadows. And again, the effect of all these highlights and shadows might look a little bit different on this video than on your canvas. Don't worry, whatever you're seeing on your canvas is probably the right color. Colors are always different across screens, so don't panic if they don't look exactly the same. So we're going back to our layer where we put on the edges for the rays, and I'm just blending out the edges for this little circle, and then returning to the highlights layer there, and then adding in a little bit of a highlight for the circular end. And then same way that we created a general shadow for the spiral on top, we're going to create a general shadow all around the rays this time with this brown color. So create a new clipping mask right on top, change the blend mode to multiply, and with the soft airbrush and the brown color, create a general circular shadow. and then apply a little bit of a blur there as well. And that's the charm done. Amazing. So the next step that we really need to do is add in some fumes. Before that, let's just group all of these charm layers together and then group both the spiral and rays together and then rename that group as charm. Okay, so it's time to create the fumes now. So go right to the top, create a new layer, and then we're going to select the syrup brush this time in inking. Now, we need to just increase the streamline of this brush to 100%, so you're able to access nice flowing curves in this brush. Because otherwise you'd really struggle creating proper dynamic flows, and it just wouldn't look very smooth. You can do this for any kind of brush. I've done this for my technical pen brush as well, which is how I'm able to create really smooth lines in one go, instead of being clunky and taking a lot of effort in trying to make smooth movements with it. It still may take a couple of goes before you can achieve the perfect smooth rounded contours that we need for the fumes, but that's okay. Now, we want to make sure that parts of this cord are in front of the fume so that it feels like the fume is curling around it. So just erase some of these parts of the cord. Sorry, erase some part of the fumes so that it appears that the cord is in front. There you go, that looks like it's curled up around it. Perfect. And I think we just need to erase a little bit of the fume on top of the label too. Okay, so our fumes are done. At least the base of the fumes are done. We're going to be adding some effects to this next. So go back to the layers panel, and then we're going to go ahead and reduce the opacity slightly of this fumes layer, and then duplicate this layer. Now, of the top duplicated layer, change the blend mode to color dodge. You can see it's turned a nice bright yellow color. Go back to Gaussian blur this time, and then apply 10% Gaussian blur to this. Now go back to the original fumes layer and duplicate it again. Select the lower duplicated layer now and change the blend mode of that to add. Now apply a Gaussian blur of about 8 to 10% again this time, and you can see how it gives a very dramatic effect to that. To add a bit more color, you're going to select the bright orange color and apply a bit of an alpha lock to the lower duplicated layer, just so that whatever we're going to color on top of this layer remains in this layer itself. So with the orange color, just paint in the orange effect of this fumes. You can switch off the alpha lock now, then group all of these layers together and then rename this group as fumes. And that looks great. So the last part of our illustration is to add in the sunshine glow. So go right to the bottom of all our layers, create a new layer there, and then return to the technical pen brush. And we're going to use this yellow color and create the first ellipse here. Complete your shape. And then create the inner one as well. And then fill it in. Now we're just going to reduce the opacity slightly and change the blend mode to add. Reduce the opacity to somewhere around 30%. and then apply a blur of around 10%. Now you're like, Prisha, I can barely see anything there. Don't worry, we'll be able to see lots of things in a second once we create the rest of these ellipses. So create a new layer on top of this and move it below the original ellipse. So now change the blend mode of this new layer to add again, and then we're going to start again from the inner circle, but this time our outer edge will be this bigger circle. Well, ellipse. I keep saying circle, but it's an ellipse. And then fill it in. And we're going to just reduce the opacity of this one as well, this time to about 60%. And for our last layer, create a new layer below the middle ellipse as such, and this time change the blend mode of that to lighten. So create the biggest ellipse that we've got there, draw it out, and then remember to draw the inner one as well before we fill it in. There you can see it's all covered in now. It's a nice glowing effect that we're trying to achieve. So reduce the opacity of this one to 80%. And we're going to blur this layer too. So apply a Gaussian blur of about, let's say 20% to that. And then go back to the middle layer and apply a Gaussian blur again of around, let's say 10%. You've got a nice soft glowing appearance there, which is exactly what we wanted. Now use the soft airbrush as your blending tool, and we're going to softly blend out the sun rays. So go from the center to the periphery, and you can even play around with the brush size here. And place in some random sun rays basically. Try not to be very methodical about where you're placing in the bigger rays and the smaller rays. The more random they are, the better they'll look. And that's that. That looks amazing. So now we just need to just turn off the sketch and have a look. That's looking good. I think we just need to erase a slight portion of this central part of our sunshine rays as well. In a second, I'm just going to increase the sun rays a little bit there. Give it a more dynamic look. So what I've done is I've gone back to our largest ellipse there, and with the soft airbrush I am just erasing the central part of the glow and then blending it slightly. So it gives it a nice halo kind of an effect there. Perfect! So it's time for my favorite part of the illustration. We're going to add in some magical dust. So create a new layer, and with the light pen in luminance, we're going to make some magical dust with this yellow color. So play around with the size of the brush and then add in some little glowing fireflies / magical dust all around the potion. And you can even put in some of these dusts on the label itself. And don't forget to add some dust around the sun rays as well. I'm just going to go ahead and reduce the opacity slightly for the dust, just about 90%. And then also increase the opacities of all the fumes layers to a full max for a brighter effect. And there you go, you've just completed this Drops of Sunshine potion. Thank you so much for joining me in this tutorial, and I hope you really had fun with it. So make sure to subscribe to my channel if you liked the tutorial, and don't forget to get your sketches and palettes from the Artistic Archive. I'll see you in the next one. Take care!